I'm just going to read some quick bios. I'm thinking if you're here, you probably know who most of these amazing authors are. And thank you for making the journey to here. I live in San Diego, and I'm like, I have no idea where that theater is. So thank you. So for when Sylvia comes, you'll know who she is. Sylvia is the #1 New York Times, USA Today, and international best-selling author with over 20 award-winning novels translated into 41 languages. Tessa Dare. Tessa Dare is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of 13 historical romance novels and 4 novellas. Her books have won numerous accolades, including the Romance Writers of America's prestigious Rita Award and multiple RT Book Reviewers' Choice Awards. Booklist has named her one of the new stars of historical romance. Nalini Singh. New York Times bestselling author Nalini Singh is passionate about writing, though she's traveled as far afield as the deserts of China, the highlands of Scotland, and the temples of Japan. It's the journey of the imagination that fascinates her the most. She's beyond delighted to be able to follow her dream as a writer. Chloe Neal is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of The Devil's Isle, CHICAGOLAND Vampires, and the Dark Elite series. She was born and raised in the South, but now makes her home in the Midwest. Christina Lauren, there are 2 of them, is the combined pen name of longtime writing partners, besties, soulmates, and brain twins, Christina Hobbs and Lauren Billings, the #1 New York Times, #1 USA Today, and #1 international best-selling authors of young adult and adult fiction. And I'm HelenKay Dimon. I write romance, and I am here to be your moderator, although I see the back of my name card says people in the audience may be under 18 years of age. I think that's our warning, so know going in. So everybody here writes romance, some subgenre of romance. Can you just talk about what subgenre you write and why you picked that one? Why it is you write the subgenres you write?
Okay, we can start down here. I'm Lauren of Christina Lauren. We write erotic romance erotic romance, and we also write sort of more like contemporary erotic romance. Like the focus really is on the love story, and it's a little bit more mainstream, but it's pretty smutty sometimes too. And I think the reason we got into that is because we love romance in any form. We also write YA fiction, so our teen fiction also has, kissing in it. It has a love story, and that has also more like supernatural elements as well. But we love romance stories. We love the happy ever after. We love the meet cute and the conflict, and all of that is just really fun for us to write. So we kind of enjoy writing together. We have complementary skills and strengths, and it's just been a lot of fun.
I think we have somebody waiting if you want. Oh, come on over.
Sylvia's here.
Not the entrance you want to make.
It's so easy to find. We don't know why you had trouble.
All right, and now we're out here. Hi, I'm Chloe Neal. I'm the author of 3 paranormal romance / urban fantasy series. One is Modern Day Vampires in Chicago, one is Young Adult in Chicago, and one is, I think we're calling it post-urban fantasy, dystopian, apocalyptic something, which is set in New Orleans. I am kind of the mean one, I think, because in urban fantasy, you draw that business out as long as you can, because we want to really see the angst between the hero and the heroine. We want them to, when they get together in the end, to have this, long history between them. So I'm currently writing, not literally, but I will be when I get back to the hotel room, I promise, the 13th and last novel in the Chicagoland Vampires novels. And I will cry, but it's got all sorts of good stuff in it, and I'm just going to throw this out there. Spin-off. Announcement forthcoming. So I'm Nalini. I write paranormal romance, and so this series actually it's funny, when it first came out, they put urban fantasy romance on the side because nobody knew what to call it. And I write a bit of contemporary as well, but in all of it, what I love is doing the world building.
I came into writing paranormal romance from like reading science fiction and fantasy, and I always want a little more romance in my books. On the flip side, in the romances, I wanted more world building, and so that's what I love to do. I love to create these huge worlds and tell stories in them. And so the 15th book in the PSY-CHANGLING series just came out. And I was like, yeah, I should stop here now. I just love it too much. With the Girl Hunter series, it's slightly different. I actually really wanted to tell the story of like a couple that was together, because quite often you get to the end of like a supernatural type story, and it's the immortal and the mortal get together and it's happy ever after. But I was always like, but how do they make it work? So that's what I like try to do in this story. And with my contemporary stories, it's rock stars, so they're like paranormal creatures anyway. So it's all the sameness.
I'm Tessa Dare, and I write historical romance. And unlike the rest of you, I write in the tiniest world possible. It's like England in quite literally 10-year period of history. And I usually describe it as Jane Austen times, but with things that I probably shouldn't mention, given the fact that some people here may be under 18.
Don't listen. Go ahead.
And I just love that writing in historicals in that time period, because there's carriages and balls and unlacing.
Sylvia, we're talking about what subgenres you write in and why you pick those.
Well, I write everything. From historicals to futuristics, paranormals, contemporaries, I mean, you name it. And they're all set in the same fictional universe. So some people that are in my historical novels, their great-great-great-grandchildren may be in one of my futuristics. They may visit, a place that we'll later find out about in one of my paranormal stories. My contemporaries will reference characters from the past as well as characters from the future. So for me, it's like one big giant place. And I write in all these different subgenres because I look at the story that I'm trying to write, and I look at what the conflict is, and then I try to figure out what time setting can I put them in to make this as difficult as possible, so that I can torture them to death for longer. And that's really the litmus test for me. It's like, what is going to make you want to rip your heart out? And a historical, okay, that's where it is, or a futuristic. So.
There are a lot of perceptions about romance writing. Everybody in here has a positive one, so we're not worried about that. Some of them out there aren't always that flattering. They seem to go back to books that, I don't know, even when they were written. What do you think the biggest kind of mistake or the biggest thing people think about romance that really isn't true these days when you're writing in 2016?
I actually think the romance reader has been miscategorized a lot. It's not, everybody is a romance reader. There are romance stories in pretty much every subgenre of fiction out there, and plenty of nonfiction as well. And so I feel like for somebody to say, well, I'm not really a romance reader, you are a romance reader. You might not seek out one of us on the stage specifically, but everybody loves love stories. And so I feel like when people speak about romance as a genre, they tend to think about a certain type of romance reader who's like a woman whose kids are at school and she's sitting at home like having 3 lunches and whatever. Like, that's just so inaccurate. And I think one of the things that Christina and I found when we first met, we were writing online, all these women writing online and reading online were, we had attorneys, we had pediatricians, we had stay-at-home moms, we had school teachers, we had every kind of woman, and a lot of men too. And I think in a lot of ways we sort of tend to try and think like, who is the romance reader? And it just needs to be a lot broader. Like, the romance reader is everybody. Everybody has a story that they want to hear.
And I think a lot of people assume like the things we're writing are like the things we do in real life or like our fantasies, and I'm pretty sure that my husband would say that is not true.
My husband would love for you to think it.
Honestly, I would love to have wings and fly. Really, I would really, really love to have wings and fly, but it's not happening. I think one thing that quite often people say about romance is that it's all the same because it's going to the happy ending. And that misses the point. It's not about the ending, it's about the journey of the characters. And I wish people would get that. Because all of you out there would have experienced relationships in your life, and they're all different. they're all unique, and they come from who you are and come from the characters in the books.
The term bodice ripper drives me absolutely insane. And I get where it comes from. You know, the early 70s romances that, you know, became really huge and actually, you know, started sales of the genre featured women who were oftentimes, you know, put in these forced seduction, which is the nice way of saying they were raped, sorts of books. And that was pretty stereotypical for the genre back in the 70s. Obviously, many, many years later, that is not the way we write books anymore. The perception that a woman is just waiting to be ravished, that her life has no meaning, that all she's doing is looking for the man of her dreams is completely inaccurate. Most historical and contemporary and paranormal and futuristic, you name it, heroines, they have completely fulfilled lives. And actually, when a man comes along, that's the last thing that she wants, because her life is so fulfilled. She's got so many things to accomplish, so many ambitions, that having a romance is just completely inconvenient. As far as being ravished, she's more likely to ravish him than the reverse, because they're sexually empowered. These are women who know what they want and they know how to get it, and they're not, you know, they're not afraid to go out and make it happen. So that bodice ripper perception is just completely outdated. If you ever hear that term, it's just not even true of today's romance novel.
So you don't sit around in your negligees eating bonbons as you write your books and no.
Sure.
Did you?
Maybe I'll pajamas and one.
I go days without washing my hair, so no, it's not true. It's not true. But let's talk a little bit about heroines. I think that's another thing where there's a perception that romance heroines are a certain type. And I write romantic suspense, so they can a lot of times pick up a grenade launcher, so they don't really fit into that type. So what type, talk a little bit about like heroines and what's important to you to kind of get on the page and get across, and how you think they are today maybe versus the 80s.
Tying both of those questions together, when I first started writing, I don't get it as often now, I think, just because time has moved on, but I get a lot of, so you write Twilight? Stephanie Meyers wrote Twilight, and that's great. I am not Stephanie Meyers, so I'm writing my own thing. But there is definitely a sense that whether it's paranormal romance or vampire romance, there is one book that everybody is just writing over and over and over again. And you know, the heroine in Twilight had her own journey. All of us write heroines who have different journeys than that one. And I think one of the things that I tried to do is give a heroine who, as Sylvia mentioned, has her own perspective, she has her own life. In the vampire books, unfortunately, a lot of that is kind of taken away in the beginning of the book, but it's a woman who came and had certain very specific expectations of herself and has learned that those expectations were essentially completely wrong, and she can become something very different than she thought she would be. And I like to have heroines who are not quite aware of their potential, who see it by being brave or by being courageous or by taking a chance on a vampire that, you know, is maybe against your better judgment. That to me is the fun part.
Yeah, I think, you know, for us, like, one of the things we want to get away from is the idea that a woman, the way to be strong is to be kind of like a dude. You know, that like the strong heroines are the ones that swear a lot or like really self-sufficient, and they have like their, they're sort of that stereotypical masculine characteristics. And I feel like there are certainly women like that. I swear a lot, and I feel like there are a lot of ways that I have those, but I feel like there's other ways to be strong too. You can be quietly strong, and you can be emotional, and you can be sort of intuitive in the ways that we can embrace strength in heroines. That doesn't necessarily mean it's like Katniss, like I love Buffy, I love Katniss, but a female doesn't have to be a warrior to be strong, and I think if we can write, even in contemporary, we can write women characters who kind of embrace all of the qualities of strength. That's what we try and do.
I definitely agree with Lauren there, because I think it's finding the strength within whichever type of character you've got, or whichever character you've got. Like with the CHICAGOLAND series, I started out with an empath who, is never going to hurt anyone, and yet she is one of the most powerful characters in the book because she has the ability to handle the most horrible emotions from other people. So I really believe that I think there's just so much breadth and depth in the heroines we can write today. And I think we're all taking advantage of it. We write very different heroines, and I love all of them. I read all these ladies, and they're awesome.
I think in historical time periods, we tend to think of women being forced to just embroider and sip tea. I like to write really geeky and empowered heroines, even though they're maybe different for their time. I've written geologists and physician heroines. And
you had a heroine with a fandom, like the
yes, I even had a heroine with a fandom.
awesome.
You all write different kinds of books. If somebody said to you, what makes a Sylvia Day book or what makes a Chloe Neal book, is there something, like some folks, you think of Suzanne Brockman, it's kind of almost like that band of brothers feeling that she likes to bring to her books. Is there something that you think kind of makes you stand apart, like this is a Sylvia Day book, or this is the kind of things you would find in my book, regardless of what subgenre you might be writing?
Well, I mean, obviously what makes my books is in part the way I put words together, so that, there's that level of craft, or what we call a voice. The way I'm going to write a sentence is not going to be the same way that somebody else writes a sentence. But the underlying theme, which is what I think, we're talking about here, every writer has a theme. And the first time somebody told me that, what your theme is, I'm like, oh wow, I'm doing it wrong because I don't have a theme. I'm writing historicals, I'm writing paranormals, I'm writing contemporaries. I don't have a theme. It's a love story. Is that my theme? It took me a while to actually figure out, what it was. And then when I looked back in hindsight at what I'd been writing, I realized that my theme was always there. And I feel like it's innate to you as a writer what your theme is. For me, it's surviving. So all of my characters are survivors. And that doesn't necessarily mean physically surviving death or, it's just they've suffered some sort of trauma or some sort of life-changing experience that changed who they were. They've evolved, and the person who they are now is not necessarily the person that they expected to be or wanted to be, and they have to adjust to that situation. So surviving is my theme. It follows in all of my books, so it doesn't matter what you pick up. You're going to find that. And it'll be, it's different from other writers who may have surviving as a theme, and it's certainly different from other writers who have things like family or brotherhood or, so forth. But yeah, Sylvia Day book is one in part my voice, and the other part is stories about characters who are surviving.
I would say courage and sarcasm. and I've made that, I hadn't really thought about the books having a theme before, but now that I think about it, that's kind of the point of writing urban fantasy, essentially, is you throw somebody into a situation and you watch them fight their way out of it with a monster, with somebody who's got magical powers, with, a corrupt leadership, whatever the situation is. But now that I'm thinking about it, and probably because I'm writing right now, there's a lot of, man, I really don't want to do that because I'm scared of it, but I am going to do it anyways. And I think, now that I think about it, that's kind of through all of my books, plus a lot of sarcasm. And maybe geek references. Because I think particularly for my characters, those are the things that help them find the courage, is they can share with their friends, God, this is miserable, this is going to be horrible, but we're going to do it anyways, we're going to do it together, let's try to make it as enjoyable as possible.
I would say Lo and I are pretty ridiculous in real life, and so our books are sort of like, they're funny and sexy. We call them smutty romantic comedies. Our YA is probably a little more like earnest, and sincere. But for our romances, if you pick them up, we just want you to basically read a book that's going to let you disappear.
Yeah, they're a little bit more everyday romances, people you might know, and how their love story unfolds, and I think we like writing groups of people that we might want to be friends with and how they might entertain us, and the obstacles that we might face in our lives or somebody we might know and how we work through that, and
sort of like smart, strong women and the men that sort of get blown over by them.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me it's family, and it's not just blood family. I write about groups of people who choose to be family, and I actually, like Sylvia, I didn't realize I was doing it until I sort of went back through my books, and I thought, oh, these people are all creating families, and there's all these threads of relationships. There's the romantic relationships, the friends, the bromances. I love writing a good bromance, and and what I've discovered is I actually like reading those kind of books as well, which was really interesting to me. So it's obviously something inside me that is just drawn to that.
I guess if I had to say one word, I might say awkwardness. I tend to write heroines who are smart yet awkward a little bit, and then these hot guys who just can't resist them. And I think of them as romantic comedies as well.
As writers, we get all the time the where do your ideas come from, right? Like you all get that, and the answer is everywhere, right? But is there anything that does inspire you, that specifically that helps you to write or think about, or a book, or is it a book by book basis?
I think it's just important to read in general. I really believe, like, as a writer, I love reading, and I like to read across the genre and across genres in general. But I really, really believe if you're a writer, you've got to read to fill the well. And I know it just, when I'm stressed out, when I'm really, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make this deadline, this book is terrible, I just need to take a break, take a chill pill, and go read a book, and I'll be fine.
Yeah, I've actually spoken to some author peers who they love to read, but reading also stresses them out when they're stuck, because it's like they find a really amazing book and they're just like, oh, like I can't do this.
That's me.
And I think, but it's true that once you pick up a book, like there's some authors for me, Laini Taylor is one, who's just such a wordsmith that like your brain just kind of blossoms when you read it. Even though I would never write a book or be able to write a book like she writes her books, it's just the way she puts words together, or even a single sentence, you just write that down and you kind of marinate on it for a while. Like reading absolutely is where I'm like triggered, and TV shows, like great dialogue, it's fun.
I read a lot of nonfiction. It's hard for me to read a lot of fiction when I'm writing. I tend to binge it when I'm not writing, because either I don't want to have anxiety over I would never be able to do the thing that this person did, which is an issue for me. But nonfiction gives me weird ideas or little bits of things I can throw in. If I'm reading about, something that happened in Chicago historically, and I'm writing about vampires in Chicago, I don't need to do a 2-page treatise on, Devil in the White City, but I know now a little bit more about the history of the town that helps me understand what the people who live there, what their motivations are, what inspired the architecture, what inspired the food.
That's an awesome book, by the way.
Such a good book, such a good book. So it's all those little kind of tidbits that I hope, as I'm reading, flow into my subconscious and I can kind of pull them out later.
And you guys mentioned reading. Do you read the subgenre? Like I can't, if I'm writing romantic suspense, I can't be reading romantic suspense. Can you read the subgenre that you're writing at that moment?
Oh yeah.
No,
I cannot.
I can't.
Just so you know.
Once I'm done writing in Chicago, I'm going to read Jim Butcher's series, which I don't read urban fantasy when I'm writing, and I don't want to read Chicago books because I don't want to inadvertently take something or change the way that I write about Chicago. So that's like, first books in my pile of my to-be-read list when I'm done, so I can actually have a full enjoyment experience of reading Jim Butcher.
Yeah, I definitely read. Like I read a ton of historicals because I can't write a historical to save my life. So yeah, I think the reading is great, but I need to get away from what I'm doing as well. So yeah, historicals, nonfiction, true crime, very different stuff.
It's always good to know writers are avid readers. I think sometimes readers don't realize that we're the biggest fangirls of some other authors out there. How many people in the audience are writers? Okay, for those folks, and just for those who are interested, what piece of advice would you give to writers who are starting out? Do you have anything that you like to say to them? Anything, anecdote, anything that helps them?
I always suggest that aspiring writers finish 3 complete novels before they contemplate publication.
Why?
I think that this push-button publishing, it has kind of put a rush on things, and people don't allow their inner writer to grow and evolve and become knowledgeable. So they're in such a hurry to put it out there. When I wrote my first book, I thought it was amazing. I really did. I finished it. I was so proud of myself. I sent that thing out everywhere. Thank God it didn't sell. Eventually it did come out after I had written other books and published other things, and then I went back to it and said, this is really bad. But there was the kernel of me in there that needed to be polished and needed to be more self-aware. And And once I had that and I went back and wrote that book, I'm now extremely proud of that book. I'm so glad it did not get published in the form that it was in the first time around. You know, writing your first book, getting to the end is extremely difficult. It's something worth celebrating. You should definitely be proud of that. That doesn't mean it should go up for sale. Writing the second book is harder. You'll get to the sophomore slump. Can I do it again? You know, will I love it as much as, you know, that other book that I wrote? I mean, you have all of these questions that come in and slow you down. By the time you get to the third book, one, you're kind of aware of what your strengths are. You're also aware of what your weaknesses are. You know what scenes are going to take a little bit more time from you, which scenes are going to write themselves. And you're also going to know how long it's going to take you to finish a book. And let me tell you, if you put a book up for sale and people love it, the first question they're going to ask is, when's the next book? And you have no idea. And I know, you know, I've watched friends who, you know, didn't take that advice. They put the first book up for sale. They struggled and struggled and struggled with the second book. You know, by the third book, they're losing readers because it's taking them so long to put it together, and they don't know what they're doing. And then they go back to the first one and they realize, wow, I made so many mistakes. You know, I can't fix it. I mean, give yourself the time. You know, don't be in a rush. There's no hurry. You know, if you're a writer, you're going to continue to produce work. You're going to get better with every single book. You know, and let that first book that somebody reads for you be a really, really good book. And you're not going to know that with your first one.
I would say give your words to somebody that you trust that will tell you what sucks about them. Because it's easy to look at something and be like, this is great. And then it takes somebody that you really trust to give them this like thing and be like, here.
Yeah.
And then they can go, okay, so this is great. And this is really good. But this part, not so much. And you just really need that. I mean, our books are like what they are because like we have a great editor, and that's something that you just have to learn as you go. And Lo would also say have a schedule and stick to it.
It doesn't work for everybody. If you're a schedule-oriented person, having a writing schedule really helps. But
I would add a caveat to that, which is don't share too early.
yeah.
Because you need time to let your writing voice develop. And people can be super helpful, but if you have too much input, you either get stuck or it becomes very bland because you're trying to please everyone.
Yeah.
Because especially at the start, I think you're really vulnerable to feedback. So it's better to actually write enough that you know who you are as a writer and what you won't change in your book, even if you know it's going to make some people uncomfortable or angry or it's not going to work for them. But it's important, it's critical for the heart of that book.
And the other reason I think maybe to wait too is because it's a good pre-reader is really, really hard to find.
Yeah.
And once you find one, you don't want to wear out their thoughts on it. Like the more they read it, the harder it is going to be for them to be objective anymore because they're going to see the changes in that first revision and they're going to be like, they're not going to have fresh eyes. So I think that's really good advice to wait.
I think there's a belief out there that once you write one book, like something, you sell that book and something clicks and it becomes easier. Feel free to laugh. I think the reality is that it doesn't become easier. When that is the case, or if that's the case, maybe somebody on this panel has no problem, every book is fine. What is it that you do to kind of motivate yourself to keep going?
I'm writing number 18 right now, and none of them have been easy. They're all different though. I mean, the process is different. The pace, not of the book, but of the writing is different with each one. And I still get panicky about not being able to finish it, not knowing what to say. Is it all those kind of, is it going to sell questions that really you should put out of your mind and focus on writing the story. But I will say now that I have done 17 of them prior, I'm able to say, this is just anxiety. It's going to happen, but you're going to get the book done because you know how to get a book done, which is putting your butt in the chair and getting the book done. It doesn't have, even if it's not perfect in the first draft, even if the words are clunky, get the draft done and then move on to the next step. But worry about that one step that's in front of you, and that has helped me quite a bit.
We've had the experience where it's been weird, where we have a story that's really clear in our head, and then we go to write the book, and it's like does not come out at all like we expect. or we have, one that it's really clear and it comes out exactly like, so the ones that are hard aren't always the ones you expect to be hard. And I think for us, it's like, we're lucky in that we have each other to talk it out. We always have somebody who's just as invested as the other. And so that's usually how we push through it. But it's always kind of like our process is always the same. We always get frustrated at the same, like, she struggles at the beginning, I struggle at like 2/3 when I want to burn my computer. So that's always the same, but it's kind of unexpected which books are harder for us. So and we're often blindsided by that, like, whoa, like we thought we knew this story and it's like not what we expected, so.
I try to tell myself that I'm pupating. Wow. I'm sciencey. Yes, exactly. Like when a caterpillar goes into its chrysalis, it has to completely liquefy itself, become goo, before it can put it together wings. And so I try to remember this because I so often feel like goo.
I don't think anybody can top that, so we're I'm always a little careful with the process question, because the caveat is it doesn't matter how anybody else writes, but sometimes it's interesting just to kind of hear what people's process is, just from wow, that's an interesting kind of thing. George R.R. Martin talks about, you hear a lot of times the plotter and the pantser. George R.R. Martin talks about the architect and the gardener. You plant the seed and then it has to grow, and that's how you do it. Or you have to know all the structure in your mind. What kind of writing process, again, caveat, don't do this at home, do you use to write a book?
Well, I'm definitely what they call a pantser. Basically, a story comes to me, one particular scene, and it comes into my head like a movie. Like I see everything they're wearing. I can smell what's around them. Everything is just so vivid to me, and it's just this one scene. It's like walking into, a room where somebody's mid-movie, and you catch one scene, and you walk out and go, man, I want to. What was the name of that? I want to watch that because that one scene was so interesting. That's how the book comes to me. And then at that point, I become like the investigative reporter, right? I start pulling out my notebook and I'm like, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you having, it's usually a conflict. They're arguing with somebody or, something's on the line. Why are you here? How did you get to this point? I start asking these questions. And of course their reactions, I'll be like, wow, you're really angry about this. Like, it's not that big of a deal, and then I try to think of what their backstory was that would make that a trigger for them, that would make them more upset about something like that. So I start asking questions. And sometimes that scene that comes into mind is one of the early scenes in the book. Sometimes it's the last scene in the book, somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it actually ends up in the book. Sometimes it doesn't. It ends up, on the cutting room floor. But it starts as like the core, and then I have to spiral out from that point by asking these questions until the entire story becomes apparent to me. And that actually only happens as I'm writing it. And anytime that I sit there and go, oh, this would be really interesting if this happened, because I'm keeping that initial, inspirational scene in mind. And it's not fitting. It's not fitting in the story, but I'm so in love with that scene and I want to write it and I try to put it in there. Well, that's when I get what people call writer's block, which goes kind of back to your other question. I've learned to call it author intrusion. That's where I tried to make the story go in a direction that I wanted it to go, and it's not the direction that the characters wanted to go. And then I have to go back and look and see at that point, and it becomes apparent once I realize what I've done, I'll go back and go, that's the scene. It's like red flag, I can see it. I'm putting that in there. So it's all very organic to me, which can be a very frustrating process because, that whole blinking cursor thing and that whole thing, some people offer the advice, well, just write something, you can always go back and fix it. No, I'll delete it. So it's just, then it becomes a very frustrating process for me. So I've learned to, go do something else, go to a movie, go cook dinner for the kids that they don't want to eat, just take my mind off of it, and then my subconscious is working it out in the background, and then boom, it'll come. So, and it's fits and starts. I could go a week without writing a single word. I'm in the chair every single day. Every day I'm in the chair. But some days I'm there and nothing happens. And then the next week I won't eat, You know, I barely get something to drink. You know, I'm running to the restroom because, you know, I waited so long because I'm just pouring out words. And that 1 week makes up for the week that I didn't write anything. But that's my process. You know, I tell people that there's no one way to write a book. There's only your way, whatever that happens to be. That's mine. It's crazy.
Don't do this at home. See,
I
now you
know.
know why I said it.
Actually, I'll follow that with another crazy pants way of writing, which is what I do. It's just very similar, except I don't write in order either. I write scenes. I might write the last scene first, and then the middle scene, and then another scene, and then I have to put it all together at the end. And sometimes when I tell people I do this, they're like, "You're insane," first of all, and which is true, because all writers are slightly insane. But it works for me, but I think the reason it works is, especially when I write these big sprawling worlds, where obviously I have to keep track of a lot of things, is that even though that's my process per book, overall in the story, in my head, so it's not written down anywhere, in my head, I know where we're going with the series. And I think as a series writer, that's really critical. Not having the specific details even, but just knowing what climax point you're heading towards. Because somehow, subconsciously, it lets me put all the pieces together. So I always, say to people who want to write series, think about it. Think about where you're taking the reader, because it's really great to be able to offer like a satisfying ending to a series, and that actually helps me write each book as well, because I know when I'm gone off on a tangent and this is really cool, let's explore this. It's got nothing whatsoever to do with the climax we're heading towards. So that's my process. And the other thing that I've found is the process can change. I have actually written a book where I went from A to Z, and I was like, this is amazing. I should do this all the time. And I tried, and it was a horrible failure. So I think part of the writing thing that I actually love about it is that it is always different, and every book is different. And you can find things that work for you, but that doesn't mean they'll necessarily work for you the next time. So you end up with a whole toolbox of ideas and concepts and things that will work for you, and you can try, if it's not working one way, try it the other way. I'm always super open to listening to other writers talk about their processes and think, what can I steal from your process to add to mine? Yeah.
I'll talk from the plotting perspective. I do an outline for every book, and the outline process has changed somewhat, partly because I have to write them in a relatively speedy manner, so I want to know up front what I'm writing. And most importantly, because I don't want to have to delete words. Like, what I want ideally is to have 95,000 clean words, which means I wrote them, they stay in the book at the end, because that is by far the most efficient way to write, rather than taking out 10,000 words of a scene that doesn't fit. That's my goal, is to try to, whatever I write ends up at the book. It doesn't happen that way, but that's the goal. But what I do now, the process that I've kind of developed, is that I will have a 2 or 3 page, single-spaced, kind of a day-by-day outline, because the books are usually about 6 days long. I'll have maybe something about the character motivations that can kind of influence me as I'm writing, but a 2 or 3 paragraphs maybe on each day of the big things that are going to happen. Emotional changes, or a battle scene maybe. And I don't get into a lot of the details. What are the characters talking about? What are they going to wear? Are they going to get up and then we're going to do this and we're going to go to this other place? But just to give me a sense of, one, do the various subplots in these books kind of follow through? Can I track the subplots without any loose threads hanging at the end? Are we, am I interchanging dialogue and battle scenes enough so that they've got both the action but these kind of moments where the team comes together and they have discussion? And this kind of really broad outline is the best way that I've found to help me keep track of all those things. And then once that's done, I will take that, and I usually have a daily word count that I try to meet. Sometimes I do a better job of that than others, but that's kind of the process on paper.
There are 2 of us, so obviously we have to outline because we don't actually share a brain. And when I say we, I mean Lo, is an amazing spreadsheeter. And so we will outline something by the chapters, and it will have tabs. It's very pretty. and it will have like one for characters, because we sort of have to know what they look like and stuff. And so we'll like do a really loose outline, and we have like an emotional arc for each chapter. So like at the beginning of the chapter they're this way, and then at the end they're this way, so there's a point for everything, like for all the love scenes and stuff. And then we used to outline it all the way, and then we realized that like it never ends the way like
Or we would try and force the ending that we had outlined, and we'd end up having to rewrite it. So
yeah.
My outlines get bigger toward the end too. Like the last scene is always final scene, exciting
Yeah.
battle, because it's urban fantasy, so that's what there's
And
then you
huge
figure it
rewriters.
out. Yeah.
We're big rewriters. I am a sculptor.
Yeah.
I do not write anything well the first time.
Our first drafts are pretty messy. I think we're really good revisers. I'm not sure. I mean, we're good drafters too, but our drafts tend to be pretty messy. I think our revisions are like Adam's in the back, our editor. They're like, it looks like a Crayola box exploded in our document, because there's like 2 of us and we each work on like laptop or desktop, and then there's Adam's, and it's like 5 different color edits in there. It's a lot.
I think that's actually a good point. That sometimes writers write in to me and say, I'm writing and my words aren't perfect, it's terrible, I'm stuck on the first chapter. It's never perfect. You just blurt it out, and then you fix it. You can always fix it.
Mm-hmm.
We never know how to do it right until we do it wrong.
Yeah.
Tessa, did you want to say?
Oh, I was just going to quote Nora Roberts because she can never be quoted enough. She says, it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's what I tell myself when I'm goo.
Yeah, exactly.
You will forever be linked to goo now. Yes, it's fine. For the readers out there, other than saying thank you, is there something that you want your readers to know, or maybe just tell us what your next project is, or do both, actually?
Well, I would like readers to know that I do write as fast as I can. Really. And it's a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week job. Even when I'm sleeping, it's like working, so I honestly cannot write any faster. Of course, I just wrapped up a series that was really popular, and thank God, and I appreciate that. And now I'm writing a new series. I'm always writing a new series. For 13 years now, I've been writing new series, so it's it's fun to start something new. But as I mentioned earlier, all of my stories are set in the same fictional universe. So you always see characters that you loved from before in new iterations, and with new friends, and it's kind of an expanded world. So there's always new people to fall in love with, and people that you fell in love with before that you'll get to see again. And yes, I'm still write historicals, and I do have historicals that are coming out, so it's not just contemporaries, but people always ask when I'm going to go back to paranormals, and I would love to go back to paranormals. Right now that's not what my publisher wants me to write, so I'm with contemporary and historical, and eventually hopefully I'll get to go back to writing paranormals.
Is the new series contemporary?
Yes, it is contemporary. Yep. And it's set in New York, where somebody we all know and love lives.
What we want readers to know. Okay, I always want to tell all my readers that I know we all have such limited time in our lives. Everybody is so busy. So anytime a reader picks up my book to read as part of that limited time, I just feel like so thankful and so special, because it's really an honor in a way. What's writing next? My next book comes out in late September. It's called Do You Want to Start a Scandal? And yes, you're all intended to get an earworm from Frozen. It's nothing like Frozen. It has what I'm calling like a Regency game of Clue in it, but instead of who killed whom with the wrench, it's more like who did whom in the library. And the hero and heroine have to figure it out, so they don't have to be blamed for it and get married. But you know how that's gonna end.
Well, what do I want my readers to know? Well, I want you to know one of you can have this today. What's her name? Okay. Who said that first? I don't even know. Was it her?
Cardigan.
Okay, you can come get this later. Okay. So this comes out in November, but so I'm calling this the Summer of Nalini because all my books come out this summer except for this book. So if you're looking for a book to read, what else do I am now working on the next CHICAGOLAND book. I can't tell you anything about it yet because I need time to like let it cogitate in my brain and make sure all the pieces fit. I'm pretty sure what it's going to be, and I think you guys will like it. And the other thing, I'm just going to follow on from Tessa, and I want to say, so I'm in New Zealand, and it's really a lot of my initial encouragement to write came from readers who enjoyed my books and who took the time to write in or to write on my Facebook page, because I don't have that much, contact with you guys because I only come up here, once a year usually. So I really appreciate that. I think it is so cool to interact online and have that feedback, and that, sometimes when it's really hard going, I do go and read things readers have written to me, and I say, hey, there are people who actually like what you write, so keep going. And yeah, so I just want to say thank you guys. Thank you for doing that. And yeah, and also I'm supposed to give this notebook away too, but I don't know how to do it, so HelenKay Dimon can figure out how to do it.
We'll have questions in a couple minutes.
So thank you also, even though we were told not to say thank you, we're going to all say it because we appreciate A, that you're here, that you waited in line to get tickets, and also hopefully that you read us as well. I am, as I noted, currently writing the 13th Chicagoland Vampires novel, which comes out, I think, April of next year. My next release is called The Sight. It's the second in my New Orleans Devil's Isle series, and it comes out on August 16th. This is not the cover because I brought the wrong standee, but this is Claire, who's the heroine, and this is the veil, the first book. And she, yes, looks like a young Julianne Moore, although Julianne Moore has no relation to this series, as far as I'm aware. And then let's see what else. Oh, spinoff in the future. And I also am happy to say that we have a Chicagoland Vampires novella that will be coming out in January. So a little extra Methan for those of you who need a little more Methan time.
Yay. So, thank you.
You're all very pretty.
You are.
And
Yeah, I mean, we're readers too, and I fangirl so hard over the authors that I love. Like, I met Nalini at RT, and I was like a little shaky and breathless. And so when we meet, when readers come to our events or these panels or to a signing, and they're excited to see us, it's like seeing your joy reflected back, and that's really wonderful. Like, I can't explain to you guys how much that relationship means to us. It's everything. And what's coming up for us? We did not bring the handy stands because we always forget. You think we've never
bring
this before.
books either.
So we have the final book in the Beautiful series. It's just called Beautiful, and it's coming out in October. And we have 2 standalones coming out in 2017. Yes?
I like that we're looking at our end.
Okay. I know at least one. I think both of them are coming out next year. They are as yet untitled. And then we have our next YA novel coming out in the fall of 2017, which is called Autobiography, and it's about a high school senior who takes a writing seminar and falls in love with his the TA for the class, who is the son of a very prominent Mormon family in Provo. So we are super excited for that novel and for Beautiful. We have just had the most fun writing it, so good stuff coming up. We really love the books that are coming out.
We have a few minutes. Does anybody have a question? No going in advance, that with these lights we can barely see into the audience, but does anybody have a question? If not, I can ask another one in the front row.
Nalini, I'm a huge fan. And what I find fascinating is the world building. So I'm curious, when you're creating this elaborate world, how do you keep track? I know it's in your head, but
How do I keep track?
do that? It's so impressive.
How do I keep track? Okay, so at first it was actually just in my head, everything about the world, and then I realized when I was writing the second book in the CHICAGOLAND series, I have to keep referring back to the first book. I should probably make some notes here. So I started making notes which were character based. So because I work, the characters come first and everything around them. So that's what I did. I had a folder and I had my little character names like Lucas, Sasha, and everything around them. And then obviously the series got bigger, and I was like, that's a lot of information to give in my character notes. So my sister, who is actually my assistant, she set up like a private wiki, so it was all cross-referenced, and it was amazing, and I never used it. Because when I'm writing, I actually cut myself off from the internet totally. I don't like to be interrupted at all, so I wouldn't go online, you know, to check anything or even open a program. So
I'm the first writer who has ever said that in the history of the world.
Tell you, man, it will up your productivity. Cut off the internet. But so what I do now, this is ridiculous, is that she has to print out the pages for me and put them in a folder. And so yeah, and then that has to be updated every single book, every single short story, every single novella, any tiny detail goes into that. But in the end, after I finish a book, I will go back to the references in the previous books to double check, to make sure that the information that I have in my head and in my notes is actually in the books. Because of my process, I delete a lot, which means I might think you know something, but I could have deleted that scene and it's not actually in the books. So I always double and triple check, especially when I write about characters who are long running in the series. For example, Hawk. When I wrote Hawk's book, I had to go back through every single appearance that he had to make sure all the pieces fit. So yeah, it could be more organized, but it works for me, and so yeah, I'm going with that. That was a really good question. Would you like this notebook?
Nice. All right, you can come up at the end. Was there someone over here? Yes.
This could be for any of you guys on here. That you guys are great. Sylvia, we love your CROSSFIRE.
Oh, thank you.
Do you guys ever, like in your story, like when you're trying to weed it out and build the world and stuff, do you ever think that you get too dark with your characters, or they've gone through too much that you can't? There's no way they can be a heroine or a hero because they're just too damaged.
Do you ever worry about your characters being too dark, too damaged?
I did with Gideon, who is the hero of the CROSSFIRE series. Has a very dark backstory and is oftentimes very unheroic. And I thought he was so dark to the point that when I wrote the first book in the series, Bared to You, I didn't even send it to any of my editors, because I was absolutely certain that they would look at the manuscript and want me to change him, to soften him up, to lighten up his backstory a little bit, make him more heroic, and I wasn't willing to do that. And so, you know, I wrote the book the way I wanted to, and turned out I was wrong, and all of my editors ended up really liking the book. And so, I mean, that was great. But since then, you know, I mean, that was back in, God, I started writing that book in 2011, and you know, at the time I didn't think there was a place for it. It was a little bit different, you know, at that time. Now I think things are definitely a lot different. But anytime I start to think that one of my characters is a little too dark, or something about them is maybe, you know, a little too sensitive to talk about in a book, I watch the news, and actually, I mean, we're much worse in real life than we could ever be, I think, in a novel. And I believe that everybody deserves to have a love story about them, a love story that they can relate to, and it doesn't matter what your history is or your backstory, whether you're a hero or not very heroic at all. You deserve to find love and have somebody who will love you back, and I think that there should be a love story for every reader.
Anyone else want to talk about the dark? No? Summed it up. Right here.
One question for Nalini and one question for everybody else. Nalini, without giving anything away, I don't want to get any spoilers. When did you know the end game of the Pup Cubs?
When did I know the end game of the Pup Cubs? I actually knew at the scene where she finds out she's pregnant. I knew. And yeah, so it was actually really difficult not to just spoiler it when people would ask me questions. I'd just be like, it's wanting to come out. So yeah, I do know stuff like that quite far in advance. And then yeah, just have to keep it secret.
And then question for anybody. I'm trying to write my first book, and I'm finding that one of the biggest problems I'm encountering is turning off my internal editor while I write. Do you have any tips to just not stop with every chapter, every sentence, I want to go back and fix it while I'm writing it.
Don't rewrite while you're writing. And I don't know, as Sylvia noted, everybody's process is different. You know, ignore what I'm about to say, but I don't think I could do that while I'm writing and actually get things done, because I would stop, I would go futz with chapter 1. Actually, the one exception is I do tend to futz along with chapter 1, now that I just said that out loud. Because for me, it sets the tone of kind of how the rest of the book goes. But once that's done, everything else is forward progress, always forward progress.
Yeah.
Because you really, I mean, part of the problem of rewriting is, one, it's going to slow you down because you're going to overthink everything that you're doing, but also you need to let things evolve a little bit, kind of organically, whether you're a plotter or a pantster. And if you spend too much time picking at it and fussing with it, I think you're going to lose some of kind of the organic sense of getting words on paper. And even if it doesn't matter if it's crappy, ultimately you're not going to turn in a book to an editor, to a publisher in a slush pile, something that you wrote from A to Z, you finished it and you turned it in. You're always, when the book is done, going to reread it all the way. So unless you think literally the plot is not working, do not rewrite until you have written the entire thing.
Yeah, I mean, don't reread what you wrote the day before.
Oh, no.
Give yourself like a paragraph to start with to like pick it up. Or what I often do is I'll have a blank doc, but I'll put in like the 2 sentences before that I want to carry on from, or I'll start a thought that I know I'll be able to pick up the next day. But don't go back and, like, if you're in chapter 2, don't read from the top and then like say, okay, I'm going to continue on, because then you'll just tinker. You know?
These are all great things, but my brain doesn't care, and I will still go back even though I'm not supposed to. So I started using this product, or this thing called Writer's Block, and essentially what it does is it's like an app on your computer, and I have a Mac, so it works on a Mac, and you set a goal, like I am going to write 500 words or I'm going to write 1,000 words, and it essentially locks up your computer and you can't do anything until you have got your words in, and you can't copy and paste, you can't do anything. You have to, even if you're A, B, C, D, you still have to you can't. And so just days where sometimes, you just have to write, it's a muscle, you have to exercise it, and I'm my worst enemy. And so that way I at least am I got 1,000 words today. Because that's my big hurdle, is if I get into these slumps where nothing's happening, it's just snowballs, and I just beat myself up, and I'm a fraud and all of these things. So it's a really great, it's called Writer's Block, I believe is what it's called.
Write or Die is another program you can use.
That one is stressful.
It is it can be stressful. It will send you, you can set it so it deletes your words if you don't, as you stop. I never use that. But there is a setting where you have to keep typing. You can hit, there is a pause button depending on how flexible you want to be. But it will, if you stop writing for whatever period of time you have it set it to, it will start sending. It will turn the page red, spiders will descend. If you meet your word goal, on the other hand, you get a little tiny puppy that's on top of a cupcake. But the point is to make you focus and to get you out of your own head and into the scene where you can actually get the writing done.
Writer's Block is just a white screen with a little Word doc, and then it saves as a text file. So you literally cannot do anything. You can't shut the computer off, you can't do anything.
The only other thing I'd say is if you still have issues is to just handwrite. Because it's much harder to tinker when you're handwriting. Do that if all else fails.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it depends what the voice in your head is saying, what the editor is saying. Sometimes people want to go back because they start asking them questions. Oh, is it hot enough? Is it not hot enough? Was that action scene, intense enough, long enough, whatever. That's not actually an editor's voice. That's kind of your confidence questioning the salability of the work. And that's the worst state of mind to get yourself into. You can't allow that voice to speak to you. It doesn't matter what the end user, the end reader, the consumer is going to think about the book at the time that you're writing it. Because if you're constantly trying to write to what you think is the audience, you're cutting off everybody else who doesn't like that sort of thing. You actually just have to write the book that you love, and it's the book that you want to read, and it's the type of story that you would buy. And then if you write that book and you put it up for sale, that is the story that connects with readers because they can see that your heart and soul was in it. If you're kind of debating those salability issues, then I mean, what you end up with is a work that doesn't have any heart, and it is speaking to so many different people that it never finds an audience. So I mean, just like stop and go, okay, do I want to go back and edit it because of this reason, or am I going back to edit it because I think it would sell better if I did this? And once you decide, you know, the answer to that question, you can talk yourself out of going back and doing something to it.
We have time for one more question. You in the middle have been waiting. You. Lots of pressure on you right now, but go ahead.
Well, sorry. It's me. Well, actually, I just had a question for Christina Lauren. You write a lot about San Diego, and in particular, UC San Diego, Brady School of Management, which is where I work.
We added a fictional law school as well. I don't think anyone here goes there.
I was wondering, are you guys from San Diego? Did you go to UC San Diego? Or are you tied to San Diego?
Yeah, no, so I grew up in Berkeley. I have, most of my family lives in San Diego though. So I spent a lot of time down here when I was a kid, and now I live in Orange County. And we actually met at San Diego Comic-Con back in 2009. And so it's kind of a special place for us. Like we just sort of, it's where we have like a lot of good memories here. We're here all the time, and
I got like our little matching tattoos.
we do. And it's an awesome city, and I feel like it's just a really great place to be. So we like having things focused here. We have, like, as you mentioned, there's stuff from the Beautiful series, the Wild Seasons. Yeah, I love San Diego.
So like we could be walking and be like, Mary Jane, those ants and those guys had breakfast.
And we're all in San Diego together, guys. Yay, that was a great question to finish. That was a happy question. Very nice.
Is everybody signing at 3? You guys all?
Yes.
Yes. So we will all be signing at 3 o'clock. Since that was our last question, you will still get to see everybody and come over and get books at 3 o'clock. But thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.